Before we step inside tonight's echoing halls, let's light a candle. Not a real one, of course. That would be a fire hazard and possibly wake the cat. But something like a candle in the mind. Soft, flickering, just enough glow to make out the velvet curtains, the gold-threaded rugs, and the suspicious cold spot beside the throne. You're not here to witness a scandal or a coronation, or a dramatic coup involving poisoned goblets and strategically timed lightning. No, you're here for the part after all of that. When the rooms go quiet, when the doors are left ajar for too long, when the walls remember. Tonight we drift through the royal palaces of history not as architects, not as monarchs, but as gentle listeners. Because some places, whether sandstone, marble, or slightly cursed limestone, keep their secrets long after the crowns have fallen. There are rumors, of course, always are. A Spanish queen who left behind the scent of bitter oranges. A French valet who still whispers the time of the king's death, on schedule each year. A Persian concubine whose silken slippers are sometimes heard pacing, but never seen. Whether you believe in ghosts, echoes, or just poor insulation, that's entirely up to you. We're not here to prove anything. We're here to notice. Slowly, sleepily, without judgment. You probably won't make it through this journey. That's fine. Palaces aren't meant to be hurried through. Fall asleep whenever the floor creaks just right. Before we enter, do whisper hello in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time your ghosts tend to stir. And if you'd like more sleepy strolls through forgotten history, gently tap the like button and subscribe to Bedtime Sleepy Historian. Now let's ease into tonight's journey, the uncrowned room of Versailles. You are standing in a room that never made it onto the tourist maps. It's not the Hall of Mirrors. It's not the Queen's bedchamber. It's a side room off a side hall near a staircase so plain even the servants forgot it was there. But the dust here gathers with intention. Not messy, not accidental. More like a kind of memory mulch, thick, fine, softly glittered in sunlight. The walls were once blue. You can tell by the places where the paint still lingers, beneath layers of time and humidity and that very French kind of mildew that smells like old perfume and disappointment. This was a music room, sort of, more of a waiting room for music. Courtiers came here to pretend they weren't loitering before the harpsichord began. And while they waited, they whispered things. Not state secrets, no. Those were for the hunting lodges. Here, they whispered things like, "Do you think she powders her neck? Or is it just pale from spite? And if I marry him, I get the estate, but not the dogs." The most notable person to haunt this room, if haunt is the right word, is not a queen or a king, but a harpist named Elise. She played for 3 winters, unpaid for 2 of them. They said she could make grown men cry with a single pluck. Unfortunately, she also made grown men uncomfortable with her habit of playing with her eyes closed, as though channeling someone else entirely. She disappeared, or she left, or she fell out of favor, which in Versailles is really the same thing. Now, they say, if you step into this room just before sunset, you might hear one string of a harp, one lonely note, like the first yawn of the evening. Some chalk it up to the wind. Others blame poor carpentry. But every palace guide knows to skip this room. It doesn't photograph well. It never did. The wallpaper peels in the shape of lace cuffs. The air has a taste, copper and lilacs. Historians still debate whether Elise was a real person, a myth, or just shorthand for any woman with calloused fingers and no husband. You sit on a velvet bench no one's dusted in 200 years. The silence is oddly warm, not oppressive, just expectant. It's the kind of silence that makes you feel watched, not in a scary way. In the way a cat watches you try to open a tuna can. Curious, slightly judging. The room doesn't want anything from you, just for you to notice that it's still here. And so you do. And maybe, just maybe, as you lean your head back and let your eyes slip shut, you hear that note. Not a tune, not a melody, just the faintest suggestion of a harp string stretched somewhere between presence and memory. And then it's gone. But the dust doesn't settle. It never does. The phantom in the Peacock Room, Mysore Palace, India. You step through a door not made of wood, but of time. Past the polished teak and gilded eaves of Mysore Palace, and into a chamber of blues so deep, they almost hum. This is the Peacock Room. Not many know it by that name today. Its official title is more bureaucratic, something involving guest receptions and occasional council meetings. But once, long ago, it was where the Maharani would receive letters and read them aloud but softly, as though she were speaking to someone else. The walls here shimmer. Real gold leaf, they say. The ceiling is a mosaic of mirrors. Tiny ones, set like starlight trapped in a jeweled net. The floor beneath your slippers is cool. Inlaid marble swirls, greens, creams, hints of lapis like distant thunderclouds. But what steals your attention are the eyes. Not real ones. Not entirely. The peacocks, carved into every panel, embroidered into every curtain, watch you as you move. Not malevolently, not kindly either, just observantly. The Maharani they speak of was young, too young to have been married to a man 4 decades her senior. But time moved strangely behind palace walls. She was clever, too clever enough to conceal the letters. They weren't love letters. Not exactly. They were letters from herself, written in her own hand, addressed to no one, signed simply, "To be opened when I forget who I am." Each one was folded in 4, pressed beneath a sandalwood box, and left there for weeks at a time. The servants whispered that the peacocks remembered for her. She had a ritual, always at sunset, always alone. She would light 3 camphor flames, fan herself once, and read aloud a letter. No matter who knocked, she didn't answer. Not even for the king. One day she stopped reading. The letters vanished. But visitors sometimes report the strangest sensation when standing near the far wall, where the marble dips slightly, and the peacock eyes are unusually vivid. A coolness behind the knees, the soft rustle of silk, like someone turning sharply to look over their shoulder. And, most famously, a faint voice not whispering but reciting. A poem. Always the same one. I was not the queen you wanted. I was the mirror you feared. Tour guides don't mention this. There's no inscription. No poem preserved in any archive. But the guards know, and they don't enter after dark. You sit now, quietly, in the corner where the Maharani might have sat. You don't speak. You don't need to. The air is heavy with remembered ritual. You feel something, not fear, but recognition, as though you've walked into a memory not your own. And in that quiet, you understand what it means to haunt and to be haunted. Not by tragedy, not even by love, but by identity. Forgotten, rewritten, whispered to yourself over and over, until the mirrors remember it for you. You breathe in. The scent is clove, rose, and old ink. Somewhere far off, a tabla taps once, maybe twice. You don't know if the Maharani is still here, but the room is, and it's listening. Versailles after midnight, the Queen's secret staircase. You are not supposed to be here. The Palace of Versailles, during the day, radiates such splendor it could knock the sleep from the sun. But at night it becomes something else entirely. Cathedral of sighs, a mausoleum of silk. You pad quietly down a narrow hallway behind the Queen's apartments. No gold in this passage. No mirrors. Just soft limestone, worn smooth by centuries of footfall, and a winding staircase that smells faintly of lavender and wax. It's said Marie Antoinette had this passage built so she could escape. Not the revolutionaries, not yet, but the endless press of courtiers, advisors, and gossip. Sometimes one simply needs to walk without 1,000 powdered wigs orbiting one's every step. But what no one expected was what, or rather who, lingered on that staircase long after the Queen's own echo faded. The palace guards have a nickname for her, La Silencieuse, the Silent One. No one knows her true name. She doesn't announce herself, doesn't throw open doors or rattle chandeliers. What historians still debate is whether this staircase was meant for escape or for invitation. Was it a retreat or a route for secret company? There were rumors always, poets, gardeners, a Swedish count with a tragic mustache, but nothing confirmed. Then again, Versailles never really needed facts. It runs entirely on performance, which brings us to the oddest report of all. In 1992, a tourist from Devon got separated from her group. She took a wrong turn, easy to do in a palace with more doors than political betrayals, and found herself at the top of the Queen's secret stairs. She claimed she saw a woman in a powdered wig and a blue sash descending slowly. But it wasn't a costume guide. There was no tour in that section, and the woman didn't speak. She simply paused, looked up at her, and curtsied, a small one, polite, dismissive, then disappeared. The woman from Devon fainted, or tripped. The report isn't clear, but what lingers in the memory isn't the ghost. It's the curtsy. What kind of spirit bothers to maintain court etiquette? You pause at the top of the stair now, where the flicker of candlelight seems to breathe rather than burn. The silence is complete, velvet thick, decadent. And then you hear it, soft footfalls behind the stone. Not urgent, not menacing, just arriving. Maybe you should turn around. Maybe you already have. In Versailles, things are rarely as they seem, and always a little too perfectly staged, which, come to think of it, is the most royal thing of all. The tower whispers of Hampton Court. You are awake before dawn, or maybe it's just the way the fog settles around the river that tricks your senses. Either way, Hampton Court stands ahead. Its red brick walls yawning with Tudor grandeur, the towers like sentinels in mourning robes. Everything here feels slightly damp, the kind of air that holds on to secrets longer than it should. You walk through Wolsey's Gate, where once gilded iron bars now groan slightly in the wind, and find yourself in the base court. It's quiet. Not no one is here quiet. More like someone is listening quiet. The kind of silence that follows heavy breathing in the dark. You could turn back, of course, but you won't. Not when there's a story waiting at the end of a drafty hallway. The ghost they speak of here is not subtle. She is not a whisper, not a flicker, not a tap on the shoulder. She is Catherine Howard, fifth wife of Henry VIII, and she does not glide through the palace like a lost lady of lace. No, Catherine runs down the haunted gallery screaming, every year, every few weeks, every Tuesday depending on who you ask. Visitors describe her apparition as a blur of white, her hair undone, her mouth open not in warning but in pleading. She runs toward the door of the chapel, her feet bare, her breath catching. But she never makes it. She never did. That door was locked when she ran to beg for mercy. Historians aren't sure whether Henry heard her cry. He was busy in the chapel, or pretending to be. What they do agree on is this: shortly after that sprint, she was arrested, condemned, and led away to the Tower. She was around 19, and yet she returns again and again. Same hallway, same cry, as if she's trying to outpace history this time. As if this time the door might open. Stranger still are the letters. Hampton Court has a mailroom. Yes, really, because people, in their infinite oddity, still write letters to Catherine Howard. They come in from all over the world. Some are simple, "I'm sorry." Others are elaborate apologies in verse. One was written on lavender stationery and sealed with gold wax. The staff keeps them in a box marked correspondence, Sach, and no one knows what to do with them. It is, perhaps, the oddest cultural tidbit of all. Catherine Howard receives more mail than most living royals. Some scholars claim the story of her haunting is exaggerated, that it's all the invention of Victorian romance, or a tour guide's embellishment gone viral before viral was a thing. But then someone hears her scream, again, or sees a figure race across the gallery, and suddenly history feels less like a book, more like a loop. You now stand in the haunted gallery. The velvet ropes are gone. This is your own private viewing. The tapestries ripple slightly in the cold, as if adjusting their expressions. One of the portraits on the wall seems to look just past you, as though it's waiting for someone else to arrive. The air smells faintly of rosemary and panic. A low sound trembles through the floorboards. Is it footsteps, wind, or the past doing its laps? You wait. Then there it is. A gasp. A sobe. A soft thud of feet on stone. She's coming. And you, poor thing, have no key to the chapel door. Perhaps don't try to stop her. She's never liked interruptions. Let her run. Some hauntings aren't ghosts, after all. They're memories stuck on repeat, desperate to rewrite their ending. And Catherine? She always starts from the same place. But she never makes it through the door. Versailles and the Queen who sighed at mirrors. The sun hasn't risen yet over France, and yet Versailles already sparkles as if it never slept. The palace does that. Pretends to be awake even when no one is watching. You walk through the gardens first. Rows of sculpted hedges try to discipline the wilderness. Fountains remain politely frozen, but you can imagine their jets once erupting in time to the harpsichord. There are too many statues, all of them doing something dramatic. Holding grapes, fighting snakes, looking mildly disappointed. Then there's the Hall of Mirrors. The doors creak as you enter. Not loud, but just enough to remind the ghosts that someone's arrived. Inside, mirrors line one wall, windows the other. They reflect endlessly. Chandeliers, crystal drops, 1,000 tiny suns. But none of them reflect you quite right. Your reflection feels a little too delayed. like it's waiting to decide what expression to wear. And then, behind you, a sigh. Not a theatrical sigh, but a tired one. The kind a queen gives when she realizes the pastries are gone and the peasants are not. Marie Antoinette's ghost doesn't wear powdered wigs or diamonds. No, she's barefoot here, her silk shoes abandoned somewhere near the dairy house. Her dress is simpler than you'd expect. She looks plain and young, much younger than you remember her from paintings. The story goes that Marie still haunts the Petit Trianon, her private estate tucked behind Versailles. There, she once tried to pretend the revolution didn't exist. She tended sheep, drank milk, and role-played being a commoner, much to the actual commoner's displeasure. They say that on quiet mornings, she can be seen walking the gravel paths behind the estate, humming a lullaby she never finished. No one knows what tune she hums. Some think it's from her childhood in Vienna. Others guess it's just the wind. What is known, however, is that in 1901, two very proper English ladies, schoolteachers no less, visited Versailles and swore they slipped through time. They claimed they saw Marie sitting in the grass, sketching lazily while servants and courtiers floated nearby. Everyone wore 18th century clothes. The air felt different, like breathing velvet. The women reported dizziness and a strange quiet, as if they'd been wrapped in memory. They left. The court vanished, and modern Versailles returned with all its ticket lines and souvenir pens. Historians call it the Moberly-Jourdain incident. A few believe them, most don't, but it remains one of the most curious footnotes in ghost history. A time slip, not a haunting, as though Versailles itself grew bored and hit rewind. You walk past the mirrored wall. Your reflection flickers once, then settles. The chandeliers overhead hum faintly, though no bulbs are on. And you see her, only in the corner, not in a dramatic entrance. She's just there, in the mirror, her eyes meeting yours not with fright, but with mild boredom, as if she's seen 100 gawking tourists before you and will see 100 more after. She lifts her hand, not in greeting, but in a gesture that says, "Enough," and then she's gone. You pause. The mirror is just glass again. The scent in the air has changed, no longer dust and wax, but a hint of something floral. Crushed violets? Rose water? Or is it powdered sugar from a tart long vanished? There's one more curiosity about Marie's ghost. Some say she doesn't haunt Versailles because of her tragic death, but because of her dull life. The court was exhausting. The rules were ridiculous. She once received guests for hours just to have her corset tied. There's no breeze, no tourists, just the sound of skirts sweeping, not across marble or tile, but on something softer, something that isn't there. You walk through the clock court, past the astronomical clock Henry VIII once used to time prayers, tides, and royal sulking. The hands still tick, as if ignoring how many lives it mismeasured. There's a strange warmth here, but not comforting, like someone was just here, breathing too close. And that's when the curtain moves. The haunted gallery, they call it. Narrow, gloomy, lined with portraits of people who either schemed, suffered, or played the lute terribly. You're standing where Catherine Howard screamed. It's one of the few stories everyone agrees on. Catherine, Henry VIII's fifth wife, was accused of adultery. When she realized she was going to be executed, she broke free from her guards and ran through this very gallery, shrieking for mercy, screaming Henry's name. He wasn't home. She never made it to his chapel door. Some say you can still hear her, particularly on rainy afternoons when the light is thin and even the dust seems nervous. A young woman's wail, distant and panicked, followed by silence so sharp it feels like it's judging you. Today, though, you only hear the curtain again. It lifts just slightly, like someone exited the room before you entered. And there's a faint scent left behind, something like burning herbs and lavender water, the kind of perfume you'd wear if you were trying to hide something. Here's the strange bit. Modern ghost hunters have clocked temperature drops in the gallery. Sharp ones. And more than one tourist has fainted without warning near the end of the corridor. No one ever remembers what they saw, just that they felt a panic not entirely their own. Paranormal scholars, yes, they exist, still debate whether you walk past a portrait. The woman's eyes don't follow you, but you feel followed anyway. A draft circles your ankles. You make your way to a lesser wing. Fewer tourists, less grandeur. And there, tucked between faded wall panels and a door that always sticks, is the tapestry room. It doesn't look like much, and that's the trap. The walls are draped in heavy Flemish scenes. Hunting, feasting, heroics frozen in wool. The air is thick here, as if the past has pooled like syrup. Then it happens. A drop in temperature. You haven't moved. There's no open window, but your hands go cold. Your breath becomes visible, and the room waits. The story goes like this. A lady-in-waiting named Marie-Claire disappeared from this room in 1782. One moment she was inspecting a tear in the tapestry. The next she was gone. No one saw her leave. No body was found. Only her slipper sitting neatly by the fireplace. A love affair? A secret passage? An accident? Historians argue. The floorboards do not. The strangest part? Every so often the cold returns. Always in the same corner. Always by the third tapestry, the one with the falconer who doesn't quite smile. Paranormal researchers once spent 3 nights here, and on the second, their thermal camera recorded the unmistakable outline of a woman standing in that corner. The outline stayed for 13 minutes, then disappeared mid-frame. They never came back. You take a step closer. Your shadow tilts on the uneven wall. The falconer watches without blinking. There's a breath behind your ear. You turn. No one. The door creaks. Not open, just an acknowledgement. Here's your official historical fact. Versailles, for all its beauty, was a place of surveillance. Louis XIV designed it so courtiers could be watched at all times. Privacy was a luxury reserved for no one. Even the Queen had to give birth publicly, lest someone sneak in a baby that wasn't quite royal. So it makes sense, doesn't it, that a palace built to be always seen might now be watched by those no longer visible. And your cultural tidbit? The courtiers of Versailles used a silent language of fan movements, coded glances, and hidden embroidery to communicate gossip, desire, or danger. A flick of a fan might mean, I want to meet later. A dropped glove could mean run. We assume Marie-Claire didn't run fast enough. Now she lingers, polite as ever, careful not to make too much fuss. You step back out into the corridor. The warmth returns slowly, like an apology. The palace carries on. Versailles has more famous ghosts, of course. Marie Antoinette's spectre is reportedly seen near the Petit Trianon, pale, distracted, walking the same garden path again and again, as if the revolution still hasn't quite caught her. But the tapestry room is different. It doesn't scream or perform. It just waits with an empty space where someone used to be. And tonight you filled it briefly. Sleep is beginning to tug at your thoughts now, isn't it? Let it. We still have more palaces to drift through. But for now, rest in the velvet hush of Versailles, the hushed steps of the Tower of London. You're on the banks of the Thames now. The air smells of iron and old water. The river moves like a secret no one has dared speak aloud in centuries. The Tower of London rises before you, stone against sky, as if defiance itself had been carved out of rock. It isn't as tall as it looks in drawings, but it's heavier. You feel it, the weight of stories, the press of time, the long exhale of a place that has never, not once, been silent. You step through the archway, beneath the portcullis where so many hearts once pounded too hard. Inside, the air tightens. Even the light here feels historic, dim and yellow, like old candle wax. The guards, yeoman warders, still walk their routes in full uniform, even when no one watches. You nod to one. He nods back, a little too slowly. You begin your quiet climb up the stairs of the White Tower, feeling your feet echo in ways that don't feel entirely yours. There's a room, small, circular, plain. Just enough space for a narrow bed, a basin, and a window that's less a view than a suggestion. This was once a cell, not a dungeon, not a chamber, just a room where someone waited, and waited, and waited. They say the ghost of Lady Arbella Stuart appears here. Tall, severe, veiled. She died under house arrest in 1615, imprisoned for marrying without the king's permission. Love, it seems, wasn't quite legal at the time. She appears when you talk about freedom, they say, so maybe don't. The room grows colder, and you swear you smell rosewater. There's a scratching sound at the wall. Not rats, not wind, a finger, just one. Writing something in dust you can't read. You blink. It's gone. Across the grounds is the Bloody Tower, named not for decoration, but for the alleged murder of the princes in the tower, Edward V and his younger brother, Richard. They were last seen here in 1483. Then, nothing.
No escape.
No letters. Just gone. Centuries later, 2 small skeletons were found beneath a staircase. Were they the princes? Historians still argue. The bones were never conclusively tested. Some claim they were too young. Some say they were decoys. Some say nothing at all because silence is what the tower does best. Here's your major historical fact. The Tower of London has served as royal palace, prison, armory, mint, menagerie, and observatory. It is a Swiss Army knife of British power, and each function left behind its own ghosts. Obscure cultural tidbit? Ravens. The tower keeps ravens to this day. Giant, unbothered, feathered guards of the realm. Legend has it that if the ravens ever leave the tower, the kingdom will fall. So they clip their wings. Imagine being so crucial you're not allowed to fly. In the jewel house, the crown jewels sit beneath bulletproof glass, guarded day and night. But even here, things are active. A guard once fainted while patrolling the chamber. When asked what happened, he could only say, "She came toward me. She had no face." You make your way to the courtyard. At the center is Tower Green, where Anne Boleyn was beheaded in 1536. They say her ghost walks carrying her head tucked under her arm, which, frankly, seems both excessive and rude to the seamstresses. But tonight, she's not here. Or perhaps she's resting. You sit on a nearby bench, listening to the wind move through the stones like someone rifling through pages. This place has been so many things to so many people. But most of all, it has been a witness. And what do witnesses become when no one listens anymore? They whisper, they tap, they send chills down your spine. Not to scare, just to remind. You walk slowly back through the arch, half expecting someone to grab your shoulder and whisper a secret that's waited 500 years. But no, the ghosts here are patient. They've waited longer. You step back into the London night, and the tower watches. Now we've seen Versailles whispering behind silk and the tower murmuring through stone. And you've been so still, so quiet, just the way ghosts like their visitors. Close your eyes for a moment. Let your thoughts wander back through all the narrow corridors and faded tapestries. We still have more palaces to visit, more shadows to meet. But for now, sleep near the ravens, under the unblinking gaze of stone walls, the haunted reflections of Schönbrunn Palace. You wake to the gentle hush of Austrian morning. Mist curls over the Baroque gardens, and birds sing in perfect, practiced intervals, as if someone behind a velvet curtain is conducting them. Schönbrunn Palace does not shout. It hums. The yellow facade, bright as butter and sunlight, masks something quieter inside. Not sorrow exactly, not dread, but memory, layered and heavy like brocade drapes that haven't been washed in centuries. You walk beneath tall arches, across marble floors worn smooth by silk slippers and polished boots. The chandeliers overhead hold their breath. Even the air seems to know you're intruding upon a room where something lingers. Here, in the Hall of Mirrors, Maria Theresa once held court. It is said her spirit still paces before the gilded glass, rehearsing policies no one remembers. She is proud but not cruel, restless but not lost. Your reflection seems to shift. One blink and it's your face, another and it's hers. Eyes fixed on something beyond the wall, hands folded like a portrait. Don't stare too long. Further down, you pass a small salon with rosewood paneling and delicate embroidery. It's too elegant for most royal hauntings. But here dwelled Franz Joseph, dutiful, stiff, and unfailingly polite, even in his ghostly routines. He is sometimes seen seated at his desk, still reviewing documents by candlelight, lips moving in a whisper as if dictating decrees to a world long gone. But it is not Franz Joseph who stirs the staff's unease. It is his wife, Elizabeth of Bavaria. Sisi, as the empire called her, walks these halls in silence. She was beautiful, restless, unmoored by court life. She wandered more than she ruled. Her reflection, they say, sometimes appears not in the mirrors, but in the windows, watching the carriages that no longer arrive. She died in 1898, stabbed by an anarchist. She didn't know she had been wounded until her corset filled with blood. Now she walks slowly, still searching for exits in a palace with too many doors. You stand in the Palace Theatre where Mozart, at age 6, once performed for royalty. The clapping has long ceased, but late at night, staff have reported hearing distant applause. Always faint, always fading. Even ghosts admire talent. The gardens call you outside, to breathe, to step into something less ornate. The air smells of cut grass and hydrangea. You follow the paths in spirals and circles, as if the whole estate is designed to keep you moving but never arriving. And perhaps it is. They say the gloriette, the hilltop structure overlooking the grounds, sometimes glows when no light touches it. The whispering doors of Hampton Court Palace. The Thames murmurs gently beside you, carrying the wind-snatched sighs of centuries past. The boatman doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Everyone who arrives at Hampton Court knows they are stepping into a place where silence says more than sound. The red Tudor bricks greet you like old friends with secrets. Hampton Court was built for magnificence. First by Cardinal Wolsey, then claimed by Henry VIII, who never liked to be second in anything. The palace still holds echoes of velvet-lined feasts, of courtiers maneuvering like chess pieces, of banquets where laughter had weight and wine never ran dry. But beyond the grandeur and perfectly clipped yews, beyond the great hall and the kitchens that once roasted whole oxen, there's a quiet that drapes across your shoulders. Not frightening, just noticing. Let us begin where the stories like to start, with a queen who was never meant to be silent. Catherine Howard, fifth wife of Henry VIII, young and naive and dancing too close to courtly ambition. When her past love letters were discovered, she ran. Not metaphorically. She ran, barefoot and screaming through the haunted gallery, toward the king's private chapel, hoping to beg for mercy. The guards caught her before she reached the door. They say her screams still echo through that corridor. But not every visitor hears them. Only some. You walk through the gallery now, slow and steady. The sunlight is warm on the tapestries, but your shadow doesn't always match your movements. A breeze brushes your cheek, though the windows are shut, and from the end of the corridor, a sigh not yours. Turn around if you like. But there's no one there. In the clock court, time stands oddly still. The astronomical clock ticks faithfully, but its rhythm feels out of step with the air around you. Built in 1540, it tracks the tides, the phases of the moon, and even the date of Easter. But some say it also predicts visitations. There's a chill in the Wolsey rooms. Cardinal Wolsey died disgraced, stripped of favor. His grand ambitions turned to dust. He once ruled nearly everything except the king's heart, and in the end that was the only thing that mattered. Now, guests sometimes report a presence in his chambers. A figure in crimson, pacing with hands clasped behind his back. His robes don't rustle. His feet don't echo. But you feel the weight of someone judging, someone remembering how power tasted, and how quickly it was taken away. Downstairs, the kitchens are warmer, safer perhaps, full of copper pots, meat hooks, and the soot of centuries of roastings. Yet even here there are stories. One night, a security guard reported seeing a figure in white dart from one side of the serving passage to the other. The footage made headlines. The palace called it a draft. The public called it a ghost. Both were probably right. You stop for tea in the courtyard cafe. Modern chairs, wooden tables. But your cup rattles slightly as if placed down too firmly, though your hand was gentle. The waiter smiles too wide, as if rehearsed. Everyone here is very polite. Even the spirits. Your cultural tidbit. Hampton Court is two palaces in one, Tudor and Baroque. Henry VIII's original sections were joined centuries later by Sir Christopher Wren's additions for William and Mary. It's a jigsaw of ambition and regret, of opulence and pruning shears. A place that tells history not in loud declarations, but in the slight creak of floorboards where no one walks. Major historical note: more than a dozen people have claimed sightings of Catherine Howard's ghost in the haunted gallery. Staff over the years have reported cold spots, weeping sounds, and even faint perfume, roses and something sharper, like vinegar and lilies. You leave through the privy garden. The air smells of lavender and old stone. The gates close softly behind you, and somewhere, far down the gallery, a young woman still runs toward mercy that will never come. The forgotten queen of Versailles attic. It begins with footsteps, not yours, soft and deliberate, walking across an attic floor you have not yet reached. The Palace of Versailles greets the eye with mirrors and fountains, cherubs and gold, enough gilding to make even the clouds feel underdressed. But as every gardener knows, the brightest roses grow near the shadows. And Versailles, for all its sunlight, is a place made of echoes. Tourists pour through the hall of mirrors, snapping selfies beneath chandeliers that once reflected the careful postures of courtiers. The king's apartments dazzle with ornamentation so intricate you might forget there was ever silence here. But above it all, literally, above the decorative ceilings and golden cornices, is a forgotten floor. An attic space. No velvet ropes lead you there. No official guidebooks mention it. But it's real. And in the quietest of nights, when the wind curls around the palace in strange ways, people say she stirs. They call her the Forgotten Queen. She was not, strictly speaking, a queen at all. Her name was never etched into coronation banners. No official portraits were painted of her. And yet she ruled in her own peculiar way. A cousin of Marie Antoinette, or perhaps just a distant maid who read too many novels. It depends who tells the story. According to palace lore, she was given a small room tucked under the rafters, a kindness granted by a noble benefactor. She never left the palace grounds. Over decades, she began collecting cast-offs, parchment left half-written by secretaries, wilted roses from royal bouquets, broken fans, candle stubs, forgotten gloves, lost pearls. The leftovers of lives far grander than her own. She arranged them lovingly, catalogued them, spoke to them in whispers. Some say she believed she was the queen of this attic court. And in a sense she was. Today, servants report strange happenings when ascending to clean. Old furniture rearranged overnight. A small music box playing though it lacks a mechanism. A mirror reflecting a figure seated at a desk that is otherwise empty. In one case, a steward claimed he heard scratching behind a sealed wall. When the panel was opened, only dust and a single yellowed invitation were found, addressed not to any courtier, but to Her Grace, La Reine de Ublys, the Queen of the Forgotten. Could this be invention? Certainly. But then again, history is shaped by those who believe their version of events the longest. You walk along the gravel paths now, past manicured hedges and white statues frozen in eternal pirouette. The Grand Trianon sits at a distance, its pink marble gentle in the afternoon light. You wonder how many others have lived out entire dreams in secret corners of great palaces. Dreams just as intricate as crowns and just as easily lost. A cultural tidbit for you. Versailles once housed over 10,000 people. Royals, servants, guards, musicians, mistresses, diplomats. It was not just a palace but a breathing city. And like any city, some lives passed unnoticed. If you tilt your head just right while passing beneath the oldest wings, you might hear the soft rattle of a paper fan. or the flick of a quill. Someone is still writing up there, quietly, and she's terribly busy. There's a banquet coming, after all. A banquet of shadows. The emperor who consulted a ghost for tax policy. It's an unreasonably quiet night in the Forbidden City. Even the koi are still. You move through crimson halls that once pulsed with the thrum of imperial ritual, sandalwood smoke, and bureaucratic sighs. And tonight, somewhere between the Earth Gate and the Pavilion of Literary Flowers, you're following the scent of ink. Not perfume, not incense. Ink, fresh, sharp. The kind that only clings to paper that shouldn't be read after dark. The emperor in question, our protagonist, is not one of the famous ones. Not Kangxi with his crisp reforms. Not Qianlong with his calligraphy. No, we're deep in the quieter corners of history now. His name was Jiajing, a Ming Dynasty sovereign better known for his alchemy, his obsessive rituals, and his deep distrust of the living. He was, to put it gently, not a people person. Jiajing believed spirits made better advisors than ministers. He found them less argumentative. They didn't leak secrets, and crucially, they didn't ask for pensions. At the height of his reign, Jiajing withdrew from most day-to-day governance. The ministers panicked. Taxes were due. Peasants were overworked. Officials begged for edicts, clarity. Anything beyond the odd celestial poem, he sent via eunuchs in silk. And then came the ghost. Records suggest that Jiajing commissioned a spirit medium, a woman from the southern provinces known only as the Willow Voice. She wore blue robes stitched with copper thread and spoke in long, lilting sentences no one quite dared interrupt. She claimed to channel an ancestor of the dynasty, a ghost of governance, as one record timidly phrased it. Through her, the emperor received policy advice, including a rather peculiar new tax plan. This ghost-driven tax reform suggested basing provincial levies on dream harvests. Yes, what people dreamed of eating would determine their dues. If you dreamt of dumplings, you were charged less than someone dreaming of roast duck. It was bizarre, philosophical, deeply impractical. Still, imperial scribes had to record it. And here's the scholarly uncertainty. Was the Willow Voice a fraud cleverly exploiting a recluse emperor? Or was she sincerely believed by the court? Some officials began holding dream diaries, hoping to protect themselves by manifesting more rice dreams and fewer pastries. The system never took full effect. Too many nightmares about expensive seafood, perhaps. But the ghost remained a semi-official member of court for years, a disembodied advisor with influence over law, trade, and metaphysics. Ghost bureaucracy, it turns out, is only slightly less efficient than the regular kind. Now, as you stand beneath a lacquered beam painted with phoenixes, you catch the faintest flicker of movement. Not footsteps, not even wind, just a scroll unrolling itself. Perhaps it's only your imagination, or perhaps you've wandered too far into the pavilion of forgotten memorials. They say edicts left unread for 100 years whisper themselves into the walls, waiting for someone to listen. A small cultural detail for you. In the Forbidden City, many walls and beams were constructed without nails, relying instead on precision joinery. The structure is designed to bend with earthquakes, which means if a wall seems to shift around you, it's probably architectural. Probably. You duck under a carved lintel and emerge into a moonlit courtyard. In the center, a round stone table holds a brush and a sealed letter. The seal bears the mark of the imperial household, and a single word scratched below it in crimson ink: dream. You don't open it. Even ghosts deserve a little privacy. The palace door that opens for no one, but sometimes opens anyway. There's a door in this palace that doesn't creak, doesn't swing, doesn't even pretend to obey hinges. It simply exists. You pass it without noticing at first. Tucked in the eastern wing, behind a row of ornamental plum trees that never seem to bloom. The paint has long faded, but traces of gold leaf cling like stubborn memories. It's a modest size, too small for ceremony, too grand for utility. They say it was once the private entrance to the Empress Dowager's meditation chamber. Others say it was bricked over after a betrayal. And a few, usually the ones who talk with a nervous glance over their shoulders, say the door was never meant for the living at all. You're not supposed to be this close. But sleep stories are indulgent things, and you've already wandered through haunted corridors, conversed with spirit tax advisors, and declined to open royal ghost mail. What's one more forbidden hallway? You step closer. The wind stills. Even your footsteps soften, as if the palace itself doesn't want to interrupt whatever silence clings here. A carved phoenix curls above the frame, its wings half-shattered, its eyes rubbed smooth by centuries of time or the impatient hands of petitioners. But there's no handle, no keyhole, just a single vertical crack down the middle, a suggestion of possibility. It doesn't open for emperors, or guards, or historians for that matter. But once in a while it opens anyway. One midnight in 1742, during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor, a eunuch named Shen Yu disappeared for precisely 4 hours. He returned pale and unspeaking, holding a mirror that did not reflect his own face. According to fragile palace records, records that seemed too vivid to be faked, he had been searching for a misplaced jade brush when he felt compelled to walk east, right to this door. He remembered knocking. He did not remember entering. When he returned, the mirror he held showed an elderly woman in mourning robes brushing her hair. Several witnesses saw it. Then, just as quickly, the mirror darkened. Shen Yu fainted. He never spoke again, save for one line scribbled on his bed curtain in ink made from ashes and water. She knew my name before I was born. A curious thing even for palace gossip. Most believed Shen Yu had succumbed to stress, overwork, or arsenic-laced cosmetics, a known occupational hazard in the beauty-worshipping inner court. But others whispered about the door. And here's the culturally weird bit. In traditional Chinese architecture, doors weren't just entrances. They were status markers. The number of door studs, the material of the threshold, even how many dragons were carved into the lintel, all dictated who could walk through and who couldn't. This door breaks all those rules. It doesn't fit the hierarchy. It doesn't match the room behind it. And no blueprint ever recorded it officially. Historians still debate whether the door to nowhere was part of a long-demolished chamber, or some form of symbolic architecture intended to confuse invaders. That's the academic angle, at least. The superstitious version? The door opens only when the palace wants to let something out. You stare a moment longer. You do not knock. Just beside the frame, barely visible in the lantern light, is a tiny pair of slippers. Children's size. Red silk. Untied. They weren't there before. Behind you, a soft bell rings. Somewhere, the kitchen has started boiling ginger tea for the sleepless. The palace lives, even in its hush. You step back. Even the silence here feels curated. as though the very air has been trained in protocol. You pass a stone basin filled with water, its surface undisturbed. The moon floats on it like a lazy pearl. And just as you cross the threshold back into the safer wings of the compound, you hear it. A click, not a groan, not a bang, just a neat, quiet click, like someone politely opening a cabinet door. You don't turn around. There's palace etiquette for everything, including not inviting whatever just opened that door to follow you. The queen who left her perfume behind, but not her shadow. You wake in a chamber filled with fragrance. Not incense, not flowers, something subtler, older, a scent like warm parchment and orange blossom, with the faintest trace of myrrh and vinegar. Regal, ghostly, familiar in a way that makes your skin hum like a tuning fork. You've stumbled into the queen's wing, and not just any queen. This was the private residence of Queen Fatima of Al-Andalus, a figure so wrapped in rumor, so meticulously edited out of official history, that some palace records simply refer to her as she who dined alone. She was known for three things: her immaculate handwriting, her refusal to wear shoes indoors, and a perfume so intoxicating it was banned from court after her death. Not because it was dangerous, because it wouldn't go away. Years after her passing, servants reported catching the scent in rooms she'd never entered. Courtiers swore they smelled it in sealed archives. A visiting diplomat once fainted mid-audience, claiming he'd been enveloped by longing for a woman he'd never met. He was found clutching a handkerchief soaked in oil and rosewater that no one remembered giving him. Scholars chalked it up to psychosomatic hysteria, overstimulated minds, palace air, maybe even mold. But the perfumers knew better, because her recipe didn't use natural oils alone. It included ground pearls, burned lemon rind, and something not found in any record: the ink of love letters. She had them dried, powdered, distilled into scent. The theory goes, if you turn words into vapor, they'll never stop speaking. That would explain a lot. You pass her old writing table, still inlaid with mother of pearl. An inkstone sits on it, worn thin from decades of poems that never made it to court ears. There's a faint outline where her lamp once stood, and beside it, a scrap of parchment tucked under glass. Not a royal decree, just one line: I never vanished. You simply stopped looking. Fatima's perfume still lingers in the plaster. The walls drink it in. So do the pillows. Even the water jugs left here seem to have absorbed her memory. And it's not just the scent that remains. It's the silence where her shadow should fall. You look around. There are no mirrors here. Not a single one. Which is odd. In Islamic palatial design, mirrors were often embedded in tiles, in brass, in cut crystal. But here, nothing. Just the perfume, and light that doesn't behave quite the way it should. Once, a court lady named Hannah was assigned to clean this room. She returned white-haired, clutching her sandals like talismans. She refused to speak for 7 days. When she finally did, she said, she smiled at me from behind the curtain, but she cast no shade. The Queen's favorite curtain is still here. Pale blue silk, embroidered with thread of gold into crescent moons and fish. It hasn't faded. Nothing in this room has faded. Even the dust glows. Some believe Fatima's spirit never left, that she is not a ghost, but a fragrance, a presence that lingers not in form, but in chemistry. You can't see her, you can't touch her, but she'll wrap herself around you like memory, like grief, like a lullaby half remembered. And some nights, they say, her shadow returns to sit at her desk. Not the full figure, just the shadow. On moonless nights, no less. It begins to write, though there's no hand to hold the pen. Always the same thing. One word, smudged but unmistakable, remain. The guards don't speak of it anymore. They leave roses at her door and walk the long way around the east wing. As for you, you're merely a guest in her house of scent. And she is gracious. You breathe deeply. Let the perfume fold into your breath like a page into a book. The air is sweet and sad, and oddly cool despite the warmth of candlelight. Somewhere outside, a raven caws. But inside this room, the queen sleeps in her fragrance. Not quite gone. Not quite here. The final bow of the jester who died laughing. You enter the smallest throne room in the palace. It's not grand. The columns are squat. The ceiling low enough that even an ambitious fresco painter would have shrugged and gone home.
No gilding. No silk.
Just stone warmed by years of breath and footsteps. And in the center, a stool. Not a throne. A stool. Wooden. Three-legged. Slightly cracked from years of jostling. This was not the king's room. It belonged to another kind of royalty, the court fool. The official records call him Aurelius the Joyful, though those who knew him best called him the bell without a rope, because he rang whenever he wanted. He wore no hat with jingling tips.
No garnished stripes.
He was, by all appearances, an ordinary man in faded blue linen with a single embroidered star over his heart. He didn't do tricks. He didn't tumble. He didn't poke fun at courtiers. He looked at them, quietly, as if waiting for them to tell the joke themselves. And eventually, they did. He was the kind of jester who didn't need a punchline. He simply watched you squirm into your own. And yet kings adored him. They said he could make a dying man chuckle, that he once made a duchess laugh so hard she cried, and in doing so, dislodged a decades-old sorrow she hadn't known was still inside her. His secret? He wasn't funny. Not exactly. He was honest. Painfully, exquisitely honest. He once opened a royal banquet with the line, "Tonight's roast is like the crown, overdone, filled with stale bread, and carried by someone who doesn't know what to do with it." The king burst out laughing. The roast was removed. The cook wept with relief. But Aurelius didn't always get away with it. One spring, during the season of diplomatic visits, a prince from the north brought him before the court and asked, "What is the difference between your king and a barrel of fish?" Without missing a beat, Aurelius replied, "The barrel eventually gets emptied." Silence. The prince went pale. The courtiers looked to the king. But the king leaned back and roared. "He's right," he said. "The barrel has better air circulation, too." And from that day on it was whispered. Aurelius did not joke. He revealed. But even truth wears thin. One winter evening, during a feast that dragged long past its appetite, Aurelius was asked to perform. He declined. Politely. Said his lungs were sore and his heart was tired. "Still," said the duke, "you must earn your bread." So he stood, climbed onto the stool, looked out at the sea of velvet and gold and masks pretending to be faces. And then softly he began, "A king, a priest, and a jester meet death at a well." The tale was long, rambling, filled with quiet sorrow, unfinished thoughts, and no real punchline. It ended with this, and when Death asked who among them had lived best, the jester shrugged and said, I don't know. I was too busy watching the rest of you pretend not to be dying. No one laughed, until Aurelius did. A single chuckle, then two, then more, until his knees buckled and he had to clutch the stool for balance. The laughter shook him like thunder. It tore through his ribs and echoed off the low ceiling until even the walls seemed to be laughing back. And then, silence. He collapsed forward, smiling, dead before he hit the floor. They buried him in the garden.
No tombstone.
Just a patch of rosemary and one worn wooden sign that reads, He told the truth until it killed him. Some say he still visits that little room. You don't see him, of course, but you might hear it. A creak, a breath, a faint chuckle under your feet. And if you sit on the stool and whisper your worst secret, something shameful, something heavy, you might hear it in return. A laugh, not cruel, not mocking, just understanding. Because here in this forgotten hall, a jester still listens. And ghosts, it seems, don't always weep. Some grin,